Greeting viewers, thank you for joining us today. Columbia Global Centers Nairobi warmly welcomes both our local and global audience to the continuation of the African Book Talk series. Columbia Global Centers Nairobi is part of 9 regional hubs positioned around the world by Columbia University. The centers serve as platforms for dialogue and the exchange of knowledge in research, education, as well as public programming. We are delighted that you have chosen to be part of this broad network because we would not be able to achieve our mission without you. Today, we are going to learn more about strategizing from one of the top and on-demand writers and consultants in the continent. Sunny Bindra works as a sense maker. He helps leaders and organizations understand their worlds and succeed in them. He is a business advisor, writer, educator, and public speaker, delivering his own brand of advisory services and unique business content. He advises chief executives and chairmen in a select group of leading companies, helping them to develop strategic thinking and make radical change happen. His clients have ranged from giant banking groups to unusual startups, from those running transport networks in London to those managing disasters in Hawaii. He has advised on mergers and acquisitions in the UK and on digital strategies in Africa. He teaches governance to boards, strategy and leadership to chief executives, customer excellence to management teams. He pushes leaders to ignite innovation and to get the best out of their people by considering them as human beings, not human resources. Sunny runs Fast Forward, which is his leadership development program with a strong following amongst the region's elite business leaders. Sunny is also a weekly columnist on the Sunday Nation here in Kenya. He has written Crown Your Customer, The Peculiar Kenyan, and The Bigger Deal. Today, we will hear more about his new book on strategy, Up and Ahead, which was released in November 2021. Our moderator this afternoon will be Wendy Njoroge, a book curator, entrepreneur, community builder, and reading advocate who has formal and informal experience in the book industry in Kenya. As a bookseller and a community builder, she served as the lead in marketing for the biggest bookshop chain in Kenya for 5 years, where she established and hosted the largest corporate sponsored book club. Wendy has since transitioned to be an entrepreneur focused on filling market gaps of access and availability of books in Kenya under the brand Somanami Books. As a curator at Books and Wine, a community books and wine enthusiast, Wendy drives the discoverability of books and literary works. As a reading advocate, driven by the conviction of books' transformative power, she is part of a trio that runs a podcast, Things Fall Together, which uses literary works to highlight, interrogate, and spark conversations about current issues in society. Before we get started, kindly note, this program is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. As we proceed, please post your questions under the Q&A section. The moderator will tackle those with the author at the end of the session today. Remember to follow us on social media so that you can stay updated on our upcoming programs. Our handles are at CGC Nairobi for Facebook and Twitter. For Instagram, cgc.nairobi and Columbia Global Centers Nairobi for YouTube. I would now like to hand the program to Wendy. We will also be posting the extended bios of our panelists in the chat for your review. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you very much, Pauline, for that fitting introduction of myself and our author today, Mr. Sunny Bindra, whom I have been reading for as long as I think I've been reading the Daily Nation. So thank you so much, Sunny, for joining us today and for all that you do.
It's a great pleasure, Wendy. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and the focus of today's book talk series is your recently published book, Up and Ahead. Use strategy to succeed in life and work. The title, I think, says everything that is actually in the book. And I believe it opens itself for everybody, because once you say succeed in life and in work, I believe everyone wants to succeed in life and in work. And I'm curious to know, because this is your fourth book, why this particular book? How did it come about? What inspired it? Whose is it for? And if you can tell us the backstory of how you came about to write Up and Ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, the thing is, strategy has been a good chunk of my life's work. So since, you know, I first entered working life, I have focused on strategy at different times in different ways, but always with some reservations. I've always felt it's overcomplicated, whereas it could be simpler. It's not accessible to people. Ordinary people can't apply to their organizations, their personal lives, their own businesses. It seems to be the remit of very large organizations who can afford to hire people to help them crack this thing called strategy. And yet, I was convinced for a long time that there's nothing that complicated about it, because human beings do this thing all the time that we call strategy. But the more we sort of theorize about it, the more complicated we make it, until it reaches a point where the average person is just scared of it and doesn't know what to do with it. And I spent the latter part of my sort of strategy journey just trying to demystify it and simplify it. I did that with a large number of clients with, I think, a lot of success, because people would take to that simplification, that demystification, and start using it with more excitement and interest. And instead of it being a very boring version of budgeting and business planning, which unfortunately is what strategy has become in many large organizations, it started to become lively and energizing. And then I thought, you know, this has to be put in a book so that it's available to everyone. And I tried to very hard not to write another heavyweight, boring book on strategy. I think there are enough of those in the world. I wanted to do a light, lively, fresh one that you can pick up and start reading and keep reading, rather than get daunted and say, I'll do this when I have, you know, intellectual space to tackle such a thing. This one, I hope, draws you in and you keep reading. And at the end, you have something practical and actionable to do with it. So that's where it all came from. It was like decades of work being distilled into, you know, a couple of 100 pages. But I hope in a way that anyone reading it can say, I could use that. I think I will use it. And here we go. That would be my greatest, you know, return on this, if lots more people get familiar with strategy and start deploying it.
And I believe you get the spirit of the book as you are reading, because it uses very everyday language, and you try to come or rather to demystify the thing about how strategy is typically done, by saying, you know, organizations would have seminars. They take the top people in the organization and go somewhere else and do a seminar, or spend a lot of money and come back and wonder, wait, didn't we just do a very big strategy meeting? How come the results are not showing on the ground? And so I think somewhere in the book you say strategy is not what you say, it's what you do. And I just want to maybe take this opportunity to give you a chance to give an overview of the book, which is, and one aspect of it is the practicability of it, where you say, you give us a methodology, which you call the four-stepper What is that about? And yeah, if you can run us through that.
So let me, if you allow me, just to read something from the book.
Yes, please.
In fact, the very first words, right,
Okay.
are addressing the average person and saying, you do this all the time, don't you? Step back from the daily hubbub of your life to take a moment to reflect. Send your mind racing into the future. Have an unexpected aha moment when the dots suddenly link up. Listen to what's not being said by the people around you. Get real about what you can actually do, not what you hope to be able to do. Match what the world needs to what you can offer. Devise a plan of action to meet the goals you've set. Make things happen rather than just talk about them. And then I go on to say, whenever you do any of that, you're being a strategist. Strategy is not just for the brainy professor or the officer class or the clever hired gun. Strategy is what we all do at key junctures in our lives without calling it that. So if you study that list of things, we are all doing it, but we don't have a structure. We don't have a framework in which to do it. We sort of instinctively do it. And what I try to do in this book is to think about, if you look at strategy as an instinct the human being has, how would we define it? So rather than approach it from academia outwards, I decided to do it the other way, which is, what do people do when they were being strategic? Because not everyone attends a strategy course or business school, right? And yet there are plenty of strategists in the world, and very successful ones. So taking it to its essence brought me to the 4-stepper, right? That there are a set of questions we try to answer. The first step or question is, what's really going on? What's my true challenge? What am I up against? What do I need to become in order to succeed, right? And that I would call the diagnosis part of the 4-stepper. The second one is, what does it take to win? If I start to play, where should I play? And what will I do to actually stand out from the crowd? That's called positioning, right? The third step is actually missing, I think, in all strategy books I've ever read, and all courses I've attended, the story. And the reason that is so important is human beings don't actually respond to charts and numbers and targets. What really makes them get up and do something and be inspired is a story. And almost none of us turn our strategy into stories, into narratives, into a start and an end, and a plot, and antagonists and all that stuff. And storytelling is a missing part of strategy. So that for me is the missing middle, which has to come in and turn it into something that people can relate to, be inspired by, can connect with. And then the last thing, the last of the 4 steps, is the actions. A lot of strategy just sits on the shelf. It's a bunch of slides that we feel happy about at some point, and then we do very little in response to it. And you have to close with actions. You have to actually get the whole show onto the road. So all those 4 things, diagnosis, positioning, story, and actions, if you tie them together, they become what is the essence of strategy. And that's why the 4-stepper. But I hope that's a framework almost anyone can connect with, understand, and start using. And my experience with both applying it to large and small organizations and individuals over recent years is that people connect very fast. In fact, I have done live coaching sessions in strategy in one day with large organizations. We start with nothing, and by the end of the day, we have a working strategy. And the reason for that is most people have it in their heads. It just needs to be pulled out. And if you get a group together and they're willing to try this, by evening, you often have a working strategy. So hence the 4-stepper.
Great. Thank you for that rundown. So I think for anybody who was in the audience who was taking notes, there is a full book because the book runs through the 4 steps. And I just want to encourage the participants to make use of the Q&A. This is I'm the moderator, so it's not my discussion with the author. It's for me to make sure that your questions are also heard, and he gets to understand which parts, if you have the book, any question that you have that relates to the book, or anything else that maybe around his work or strategy in general, please, feel free to shoot that in the Q&A, and we'll get to them in the course of the discussion or towards the end. And so I want to turn our focus on to something else, that the best laid plans sometimes, or maybe most often, don't work out as they are planned in paper. And I think this is something all of us are having to deal with as we are actively in a pandemic. A lot of business strategies that, or even life plans, have gotten upended by the current pandemic. And I don't think this is anything that anybody would have foreseen, maybe even in the last 3 years or 2.5 years. And so in your book, you say that strategy is developed in the process of trying and failing. And this is something that we can all relate to in the failing part. Do you have any tips for us, for anybody listening who's a business leader, or any individual who has had to tackle or deal with failure? You know, how do we come out of that and keep going?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. I think failure must be embraced by all of us. You know, we sort of are brought up to shun failure and to be fearful of it. But the reality of life is we do our best learning, our extreme learning, when we're in trouble. We don't really do it when we're successful. And a bit of failure is what really focuses the mind and gets you thinking of options you hadn't thought of earlier. Not too much failure, of course. If you just fail and fail, that's not a great life. But a bit of failure that teaches you lifelong lessons and causes you to adjust your path, and to know what not to do and what you're actually better at doing, those are very valuable lessons, and we must not shirk them. A strategy, I say in the book, is not fact, it's fiction. Even the best strategy is just an idea, it's just an aspiration, it's a hope, it's a prayer. It may not work out that way. And the only way to test a strategy is not in the boardroom, it's not in the confines of your home. It is to get out there and try it. So the real learning happens, for example, if you're a sports team, you don't learn looking at the chart that the manager is or the coach is showing you. You have to go out and play. And you have to have just enough of a strategy to have the encouragement and confidence to go out. So a strategy should be loose, it should not be tight, because real life doesn't work out as a series of tight plans. We all know that. We've had many, many plans, we've had many hopes. Many of them have been dashed or proven wrong, but that doesn't mean we are now failing. So it's the lessons that count. And I think the best way to put it is, I think one poet said it best, that when you end up somewhere, when you end up at your destination, you realize it's not the road signs that brought you there, it's the wrong turnings that you took. And what that means is when you actually went off the path, you actually discovered a lot more about life. And eventually you do end up at the destination with a lot richer learning than if you just stuck to the highway you thought you were going to be on. And the best lessons are hidden on the by roads. So if failures take us onto those unplanned roads, it's not a bad thing. This should apply to individuals, it should apply to organizations. I say this to lots of boards I talk to. In fact, I was with one yesterday saying this very thing, that please embrace some failures. Please allow your managers to fail in certain things. Manage that failure, learn from it, but do not scar them or badge them as failures just because some things go wrong. Because the world we are facing right now, you are going to have to make bets. There are no certainties, and some of your bets will go wrong, and that's a good thing, because that's where your real innovation will come from. So that's what I'd say about failure and learning to fail, Wendy.
Thank you for that. And I see a couple of questions coming in. Thank you. Please keep them coming. And I want to take one as so that we don't move too far into the book. You have mentioned the importance of storytelling and converting the strategies to story so that it becomes relatable and it becomes something that you can sell to your customers and to your team, most importantly. And I see Bakari in the Q&A asking that if you have an example of a story that to use in developing a working strategy. So would you want to take that now, or do you want to shelve it so that we can come back
take it now, not a problem, because I think story is such an important element of strategy, and it's something new. It's not something we have been studying for a long time. I personally have not read a strategy book that mentioned the word story. And so let's talk about it because it is important. Let's think about why human beings need stories in the first place. You know, we're the only species that tells each other stories. Why do we do that? It's because we know the way our minds are, we need to feel part of a narrative. We need to feel that there's a beginning, an ending. There are some twists to come, and I have my role in this story. Or if I'm just reading it, I relate to the characters. So we do it to simplify the world. We do it so that we can make sense of what is a very complicated reality. Human reality is very complex. It's not just our observed reality of nature and the world. It's also what goes on in our heads. So all that combined is very complex. We need stories to simplify and to elaborate on what really matters to us. And the best storytellers do that. They tell you something that you connect to, and you now feel you can explain it to yourself, but also you want to participate. So there are two roles of a story: to explain and to inspire. And any story you've ever seen does that. Now, when I say story, it does not have to be a written storybook. The way to make strategy pop is to let people storyfy it. And I've done that with a number of clients over the years. And I'm happy to report that the ones who do this with enthusiasm really do some very funny and very exciting things. So for example, I have said to people when we are off on a retreat somewhere, okay, we know the targets, we know the numbers, we know the approach in your strategy. Now bring it to life, humanize it. And you have a night to bring it to life somehow. You can turn it into drama or a skit. You can turn it into art. You could turn it into a poem. You could, if there's a painter amongst you, you could paint it. If you want to sing and dance, let's turn it into a song and dance session in the morning. But let's make the strategy pop somehow. And when you give people that opportunity, you'd be amazed at the results. I have always been in tears laughing or standing up clapping at the things I've seen and heard that strategy can turn into. But people don't sort of do this. They stick to the very serious stuff of numbers and charts and projections and targets. And that's not inspiring. It's only inspiring to the person who thinks they're going to benefit from those numbers directly, right? The rest are kind of just, hanging in there. So the story element is very, very important. Examples are things like when M-Pesa came up. Well, how are you going to explain M-Pesa, to Kenyans, to your employees if you're Safaricom? You have to make it pop by showing the problem it solves in the world. You don't go into the details of, the technical details of what this thing does and what's the back end and what is the IT behind it. You talk about, you want to send money in a few taps on your phone, we have the answer for you. This is how it's done. And you've seen how that little powerful story, which was solved an immediate problem for Kenyans, has morphed into an ecosystem, right? It is now all sorts of things. But without a story behind it in the beginning that shows why everyone should pay attention to this, it may have taken far longer to get going. So a story is an attention grabber. But I must say, don't think of a story as a lie. It's easy to think we can just spin a tale. It's not actually fiction. It should be as close to the truth as possible, right? Otherwise, you will, be faking it and end up flat on your face one day. But to turn it into words, imagery, emotions is what the story part is about. So I hope that's explained it a little bit.
Thank you for that explanation, and thank you, Bakari, for your important question. Just something came to mind, and about what you said, and it's true. One of the things that make us uniquely human is really anchored in story. If you think about religion, the idea of statehood, the idea of nations, all those things are abstract concepts that we only understand because there's a story behind it. And we organize our lives heavily around the stories. So thank you for that answer as well. And in the book, you go into some of the impediments of strategy. And one of the big ones that keeps coming up is culture, that yes, you can have a very good strategy, you can have a very well-meaning leadership, but yet once culture comes in contact with the strategy, that is where the rubber meets the road. And as it's popularly said, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So my question to you is, hypothetically, say a leader inherits an organization that has quite a toxic culture, and they want to, to turn it around. What are some of the practical ways in which their well-meaning strategy has a lease of life?
Yes, my version of that saying about culture and strategy is what you think you'll do. Culture is what you'll actually do. Culture is way more powerful than strategy. And if you neglect culture, if you leave it alone, if you ignore it, you will come to grief, because culture is stronger. Why is it stronger? Culture is how we collectively respond to challenges, how we behave as a group, what are our norms of interaction. And human beings, because we are a social species, that is way, way stronger than any abstraction called strategy, because that's our daily interaction. Now, if you are not aware of that as a leader, that this is a hugely powerful force available to you, you will miss out on so much. It's, I say in the book, culture is like a hidden planet. It's there, you can't see it, you can't measure it, you can't, feel it, you can't put it on a chart, but it's hidden and it's pulling on everything else. It's affecting the trajectory of all other planets. And it's huge, it's a giant planet. So if you use that example, you have to then get to grips with this thing called culture. So if you're a leader, you have a problem with the organizational culture, please fix that. Because if you start strategizing and then try to place that strategy on a culture that does not support it, I'm afraid only bad things will ensue. At best, the strategy won't get done, but worse can happen. So you have to pay a lot of attention to culture. Culture, I touch on it in the book, but it's probably a book in itself. And perhaps I'll write that one day. Because in the last 5 years, I've thought more about culture than about strategy, because I just see it as such a problem for everyone, a challenge for everyone. The challenge, though, Wendy, is that you can't address culture directly. We think we can. We think we can identify, oh, we have a cultural issue, now we must fix it. That's not how it works. You don't go to people and say, you need to change your culture, and we are going to force you to change it. And there will be repercussions if you don't. Culture has to be changed far more smartly than that. The people who have changed culture in the world have done, when they're in a hurry, some extreme things, like putting punitive fines on bad behavior is an extreme measure and it works fast. But for the long term, you have to understand the soft side of the human being. You have to inspire them to change their culture. So, like I said, it's a book in itself. It's not something it's not a pressure point you can apply, but it comes from being inspired to change it. So any leader wanting to change culture, lead the way. Show the culture in your own behavior and in the entire leadership team. Just like in a family, it's the parents' behavior that sets the culture. Yeah. You cannot tell your kids, we need this culture in our family, when you, the parent, do not have that behavior, right? I think we all know that. In businesses, for some reason, we forget it. And unless the top team, the decision makers, the people who hold the power, behave in certain ways that are useful and good, the rest will not follow unless you are doing it. So culture is something that people are inspired to change through leadership, through communication, through example, through reinforcement of good behavior. And it takes time. But the real lesson is, do not think of strategy in isolation. You have to also look at culture as you go, sometimes in advance of strategy, because that creates the sort of fertile ground on which the seeds of strategy will fall. Otherwise, you're throwing those seeds onto rocks and they'll bounce off. So that's what I'd say about culture. I hope that helps.
It does a big deal. So basically inspire people to have like the right kind of strategy, culture, so that when you come to do strategy, you are actually bringing it, giving it a chance to take root. And we have a very specific question, which probably we could take right now. But first, before we do that, I see we have a few more people that have joined us. So welcome to the new participants. The book feature for today is Up and Ahead and our author is in the panel, Mr. Sunny Bindra. So the book is Up and Ahead, Use Strategy to Succeed in Life and in Work. And we are discussing the book, and we are asking you to throw your questions in the Q&A. That way we are able to track it. So we prefer the questions in the Q&A as opposed to in the chat, because the chat has a tendency to run much faster than the Q&A. So if you can throw your questions there, it will help us track better. So there's an anonymous attendee to the panel, to the webinar, who is saying, how do you handle a situation where the management and the staff are aligned, but the board has a different culture? So that's an interesting question that you'd like to take a stab at that.
Yes, let me do that. And I can understand why that person is anonymous. You know, culture has to stretch across all parts of the organization. The board should not be, exempt from having the right culture. A lot of work I've done in recent times is with that realization that boards also need to look at their own behavior. You cannot, just like parents cannot talk to children about behaving better if they themselves behave badly every day, it's the same with boards. You cannot be telling your organization, we need you to be full of integrity, full of teamwork, full of professionalism, and there's chaos at board level because of bad behavior. So it very much stands that the example must come from the very top, and the very top is even above the CEO and the executive team. The chair and directors must exemplify what they mean. Now, boards are special structures. They don't interact with the organization in the same way. But when you do interact, and when you do make decisions, and when you do show the way, your behavior must reflect it. Your temperament, your style of interaction must reflect it. If you want people to be friendly and engaged with one another and have a great team spirit, but you yourself are very harsh and domineering and barking orders and issuing threats, what kinship will you create lower down? So this is work in progress to make boards understand this. I think there are a few of us on this page at the moment of trying to make boards understand that really you want a high performance culture down there. You want certain behavioral norms. You want people to behave in modern progressive ways. Please set the tone at the top. In every interaction with the organization, show them that you do those things also. And therefore everyone should do it. Culture comes, in that way. People have to be inspired to follow an example. They do it because people around them do it, but mostly because the leaders above exemplify it. So that does not allow the board to be exempt. Boards also have cultures, and they should be mindful of them, and they should work on them. Very much so.
So our anonymous question, the person who asked the question, I don't know whether they're sitting in the board level or they're sitting in the management and staff level, and whether that would change your answer, because if you're the person, you're the underling and the board is different. I don't know if there's an opportunity to
Yes.
inspire change if you're not the person at the top.
You know what I would say to you is, if cultures are different across the organization, if strategies are different, if you're not feeling that alignment and harmony, I'm not sure great things will come. So if I was sitting in an organization where I feel has the wrong sort of board behavior, and I can do very little to change that, frankly, I would look around. I would try to go in places where you can be the best version of yourself, make your best contribution. And one of the things that prevents great contribution is the example from above. Having said that, Wendy, there's something else I say to everyone who tells me, but it's just me, what can I do? The people above me are not like that. They're not conducive. You know, there's something called 3 feet of influence, that all of us, no matter what we do in our lives, are given this 3 feet of influence, which means that the people we interact with regularly in our lives, we can influence. We can set an example. We can redirect if needed. And we must not forget that. We keep looking above sometimes to say, oh, well, what can I do? You know, the next step is to say, if the country is badly run, then what am I going to do? Or if the world is in such a mess, then why should I be any good? And if we all think like that, we are then heading for ruin as a species, not just, you know, as a nation or as an organization. So we must always think, I have power. I have power to influence my family, my friends, and the people I work with. They may be reporting to me, they may be working alongside me. I can set a tone and an example that I am proud of, that I stand for and exemplify, and then let people follow that. But if we fail to do even our role, our little contribution to the betterment of humanity, even our 3 feet of influence, then I think we are giving up. And then we deserve whatever happens next. So never lose sight of your 3 feet of influence in your immediate sphere every single day. You can set an example for everyone you meet, but let's choose to do it.
I love that, 3 feet of influence. And I believe this is something that we can apply not just in business, but also in life. If you think about the big problems that are pet peeves, like littering or overlapping, or just any other annoyance that, you know, maybe as Kenyans or as Nairobians that we come across every day, you know, you might not affect how traffic moves, but you can choose to, you know, follow the rules yourself and inspire the next person to do that.
That's 100% true. If you believe in courtesy on the roads, you have to show courtesy on the roads, right? Regardless of what's going on around you. You have to let people pass. You have to, you know, wave to them if they let you through. You have to use your indicators. You have to flash your lights. Do all the things you wish everybody else was doing. But if we all stop doing it, only chaos awaits us. So some people have to hold the line.
True that. So I see Susan Mutua has a very specific question that we can take at this point. And she's asking for you to expand, if you could take a few more minutes to expand about uniqueness being the core to strategy. So it looks like Susan has read the book. Thank you, Susan, for this question. And she's saying, is it, there's a phrase that you use in the book where, what are you the most of, you know? And she wants to know whether it has to be at that level, that superlative level of the most.
Yeah. So one of the misunderstood parts of strategy is sometimes we think it's strategic to copy and to mimic and to see what we see other people doing. And we call this thing best practice or benchmarking or other fancy words. Now, if a lot of people are doing something, if they're all clustered around the mean, in fact, I've written something about it for this Sunday in my column. If all of you are clustered around the mean and there are very few outliers, none of you are going to get extraordinary returns because you're all doing the same thing and you've created a crowd all trying to do something in the exact same way. True strategy is different. It looks at that midpoint, it looks at that mean, it looks at that average and says, that's not for me, that's for the crowd. We need to change things. We need to do things a bit differently. Now that could be a start with a very small thing, or it could be a massively different thing. Every successful strategist in the world has played for difference. They've not played for similarity. They have broken the norms, the rules in some way. They have tried something fresh and new. So uniqueness is very much at the heart of strategy. But uniqueness comes from two things. It comes from, number one, guts. You have to have the nerve to say, you know, when we're all around a campfire and it's warm and there's light and we are telling each other jokes and we feel safe, that's an easy place to sit. If you want to venture off where there's no light and heat and there are dangerous animals, you need a lot of guts. You also need effort. You need to be able to put in the hard work of being different, because being the same as everyone else is easy. You just copy them. Being different means you go into a place where there's bushland and there's no trail and you're the one to make the first trail. That will take a lot of work and you'll expose yourself to some uncertainty. So that's why people don't do it. But those who do, they may burn themselves here and there, they may come running back here and there, but the instinct to be different is the strategist's instinct. And we must embrace that instinct. We must say to ourselves that difference is at the heart of this. And when I say in the book that be the most of something, in the mind of your customer or your beneficiary, you must stand for something that they think that is that organization. No one else does this better. I have numerous examples in the book, right? Like, I think most of us would agree when it comes to video streaming, we're all looking at Netflix these days, right? They are the most of it, of successful video streaming into the home, right? And yet 5 years ago, very few of us had even heard of Netflix. Now it's almost universal. Because they're the most of it, they give you the best content and they give it to you in the easiest possible way, in the most frictionless way. Let me put a question to everyone here, which I often put in my strategy seminars. Which of you has ever met anyone from Netflix? You're all customers of Netflix, right? Who knows anyone who works for Netflix or has had to contact Netflix to say, you know, I have a problem. You need to come to my house to solve it. In fact, when you installed Netflix, how did you install it? Did a fundi come from somewhere with a ladder and some tools and climb on your roof? No, right? It was just click, 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 and you were done. And now you are a lifelong customer and you're paying every month, and most of us seem quite happy without meeting somebody. So they are the most of frictionless delivery of their product into your home until they become a part of your family, right? But look at the wonder of it, that how that just arrives inside your house and you happily pay, and you never have to call anyone saying, I'm having issues, I'm having problems, and spend half a day on the phone. It just works. So when you're the most of something, you stand in the mind of the customer as the best in that field and they stick with you. It takes a lot of work to be the most of something. But I think those of you who want to be true strategists should push yourselves. Pick the thing you want to be the most of and then really go for it. You can't be the most of everything, so you have to choose. Strategy is about choice. Pick one or two or three things that you really want to excel in and be known to the best of. And then I think the true returns will come on your strategy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I had never thought about how Netflix, you have no place to the company, yet it works.
Yes.
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 Everything is seamless. If you need to pause it, if you need to make payment, you know. Yeah, thank you for that example. And for the people that are looking out, want to read this book, maybe you can take a few minutes and tell them how they can get access to the book wherever they are in the world. So the book again is Up and Ahead. Mr. Sunny Bindra.
Yes, I hope the book is now widely available. If you're in Kenya and Nairobi especially, your favorite bookseller should have it. Lots of online booksellers these days who can deliver all around the country. It's a great delight to me to see that world pop also. When I launched my last book online sales were not, a big thing then, but in just 3 years, they have become. And the bookshops themselves also offer delivery all around. So your favorite bookshop should have it. Internationally, Amazon has both printed copies and Kindle or for e-readers for anyone who wants it. If you're in places like the US, Barnes and Noble, Discover Books should all have it. So it should be widely available. Should you find you can't, access the book, please ping us, come to our website and just send us a message. We will reply and tell you where best to get it. So I think first support your favorite bookshop, because it's very important to support bookshops. But failing that, depending on where you are, the big beast Amazon can also supply it to you.
Great. I want us to take another question, one last question.
Yes.
Around the question of the issue of culture before we move away from that. And there's Emmanuel Mutua from at the Q&A who has quite a long question. Let me read it. He says, I've been in a foreign organization that tried to impose their culture from the country of origin. People here accepted it at some level, but there would always be some resistance saying this is not our culture. So certain things have never been quite resolved due to the cultural issues. Who is to relent in this situation? Is it the foreign culture or the local employees? Would you like to add something to that before we move along?
Yes, I would. I'm going to try very hard not to name names here, but I hope you don't guess what I'm talking about. I was once advising a major local company, and a big international player arrived, ready to shake up their market. Very credible in their home country, big, huge resources behind them, a history of price cutting and cutting prices to the bone to take market share. So our incumbent local company should have been very worried. Shall I tell you the reason why I told them not to worry at all? And I was proved to be right. When the foreign company arrived to set up shop and start doing their business, they came with more than 20 executives from their home country who were going to take most of the top positions. And just knowing that said to me, it's already failed. It has no chance of succeeding. And we're already fine as the incumbents. And a year later, half of those guys had gone back home. And the company had revamped its strategy and I was looking for local talent. Why is that? Because you need to be cognizant of local culture. And I've said it in the past, as Kenyans, we are very peculiar. If you fail to understand us, the nuances and the intimate parts of our behavior, you are not going to sell us anything. And I think there have been example after example of that, of foreign companies arriving here, trying to impose policies and norms and cultures of what they are used to, which is very successful back home. So in a way, you don't blame them. But if a local culture is very specific and mysterious to you, the chances of you breaking it are almost nil. And enlightened multinationals know this. I work with lots of organizations where the mothership, the headquarters, knows this extremely well and allows you to tailor things to your local culture. So there's only one winner or loser in this, in answer to that question. The local culture will win. If you want to win as well, you follow the local culture and you do your best to understand it. You do your best to employ people who understand it. And then you will start to know the challenge your customers face and how you can resolve it. But having said that, I should also say some things are universal. Some things are very local in culture. But humanity is spread across this entire planet. It spreads on the mountains, it spreads next to the oceans and rivers. We live in deserts. There is a core to humanity that is universal. That core you can transfer anywhere. We all relate to our children in the same way. We all think about most of our lives with the same sorts of, tenets. That essence can carry across countries, but not the local nuances. Cuisines are different, dress senses are different, manners are different, etiquette is different. So if that's very pronouncedly different from your home country, please don't try to impose anything. You will only fail.
So I see some other two questions which I'd like us to combine before we're coming to the end of our discussion. So if you have any heated questions, our dear participants, please do throw that in the Q&A. And one is from Godfrey, who had asked this question quite early on, which I felt best to leave until now. And he's saying that any writing isn't easy. And yes, I agree, it isn't. And he's asking, just what did it take to get the book done, especially during the pandemic? And there's also another participant who is asking about fear. Marion says, what are the best tips to overcome fear? So probably you can take those two as a combined question.
Okay, yes, and those questions are related. Yeah, because we can connect them both to COVID. You know, COVID has been very, very interesting as a phenomenon in the world. If you remember the beginning of 2020, a lot of us were expecting a very different year. And we had planned for ourselves a different year. In fact, my practice manager who's here, Frida, will remember that in January of that year, we had a meeting ourselves, our team, and all our extended ecosystem to say, we actually have a bumper year coming of in-person events. We are booked all the way to November, right, in January. And this is going to be the best year ever. And in fact, we were even being arrogant and saying, the biggest job we have this year is how to say no nicely to people that we're just not available. So yes, life had other plans for us, as we discovered in February. And come March, when everything had vaporized and everything was canceled, and all of us were sitting at home, staring at the walls, wondering what just happened, there's a very fearful moment there. You actually think you're undone, right? And you have to work through that fear. Now, COVID is a real risk, and it has taken real lives, millions across the world. So you have to feel that fear. You can't avoid it. You have to be real about it. But if you are not taken by it, you have to work through the fear and come out on the other end and start to think, what are the opportunities here that this thing has also thrown out? True, all my best laid plans, all the things I had worked so hard on this year are not happening. But what else can we do now? So to me, two things popped for me and the team. One is we must start virtual learning. We must start doing virtual events, and we must teach ourselves that super fast, and we must become the most of those things quickly. That's the thing we said to ourselves. This thing called Zoom that we never understood and we never believed in last year, this year is our lifeline, and we must become the most at it. So we all taught ourselves, fortunately with an online world, you can teach yourselves things very rapidly without meeting in person. We all attended every possible training on it and taught ourselves that very fast. And we then launched a whole suite of courses called the 4x4 Leader, which launched in 2021 and has had a very successful, first couple of rounds. So for us, that's now part of the future. We felt the fear. We felt that we can't do this. We felt that, oh my God, is the world ready for virtual learning, only virtual learning? But we said, okay, we'll try it. Let's set something up. Let's go for our first course. Let's learn our lessons and do it. And I think that's the real lesson of strategy. Feel that fear, go ahead anyway, plunge in. The second thing I said to myself is there's going to be a lot of available time, compared to what I thought. If I'm not going to be traveling around the place, delivering things in person, there's a lot of thinking time and a lot of reflection time. How best should I use that time? So one of the things I did was read 100 books in that year, which I've never done in my life. I used to read 50 books and be proud of that. I had once hit 80, but I decided there's a lot of things I don't know. Why am I so surprised by this thing called COVID? That whole aspect of the world, for someone who's, talks about the future, I didn't see it coming. I feel embarrassed by that. How will I fix that? So there's a whole bunch of books I read about things like that. Surprises, pandemics, the science behind pandemics and viruses. But I also thought to myself, another thing I can do with all this time is write a book. And it was always due that I would write one every 3 or 4 years. But I actually said to my team, can you give me some time off away, handle things? Let me just write that strategy book now. The one I thought I would write at some point in my life. I think having been surprised by COVID, it is opportune that we use that surprise to write a strategy book. And I thought it would take a long time, but I have to say, it took far less time than I thought. I think all that stuff had been bubbling in my head anyway. So this is actually the quickest book I have ever written. I sat down, I took a week to say, let me get going. And I thought I'd only do the outline and a couple of maybe chapter 1. In that week, I think I'd hit chapter 3 or 4 already. It was just kind of flowing out of me. And then I said to the team, actually, I only need 3 or 4 more weeks at different times of year to finish this off. And actually, can it be fast? Because it's now pouring out of me. So I think when you spend your life doing something and thinking about it, it's all there. And I would say that to any budding author who's worried about getting going. If you feel you have the material already, if you feel you already know something and you feel some passion about it and you really want to get it out there, just get started. Yeah, just write the outline and then chapter 1, and you never know what tap may open inside you. It can come gushing out of you. And that was my experience with this book. So yes, the COVID was a time of fear. It was a time of introspection. It was a time of, being careful. But I think if you make use of that time in interesting ways, at the end of it, we're not at the end, but at the end of a tough year, found myself with a virtual program of learning, which we had never done before, and a book almost ready to be released. So those are the side benefits if you look for them. If you just stay locked down and fearful and complaining and, what is this COVID, who sent it, why, and spend a year complaining about it, then you are going to waste that year for sure. And you'll probably make yourself ill even without COVID. But to be able to just say, what's the chance here? What's the opportunity here? I think unlocks things. So I hope that's answered a little bit.
Great. Yeah, that's good wisdom. Like, roll with the punches. Take a minute to be on the ground, but the next minute, get up and do something with what you've been handed. 100 books. Oh my gosh, that is yes. Nothing short of inspiring.
I don't think I can repeat that, but it happened in that COVID year.
Yeah, that's a good thing that came out of it. And I know you've been championing books and reading, and especially physical books and indie bookstores. Why is that? Yes. Other than the fact that you're an author, and why does reading and books hold such a special place for you as we wind up?
Yes, I have written a lot in my weekly columns in recent years about this thing called why books. And thank you for giving me the chance to explain it succinctly. There's a simple thing I'll tell you, and this was said by Seneca, the Roman philosopher. We say we can't choose our parents, and that's true. We are born to certain parents, but we can choose whose children we wish to become. And that's what Seneca said. And that has always stayed with me. You can choose whose children you wish to become, whose example you wish to follow, who inspires you the most, which stories resonate with you. And to me, book reading is the act of becoming somebody's child, because they have done a lot of work for you, and you choose to read it and incorporate it into your life. They become your invisible mentors. A lot of us spend our lives looking for mentors who are going to help us. And when many people tell me, I say to them, the mentors are all there. They're in the library, they're in the bookshop. You just have to pick them up. They're ready to help you. They will help you do this. But if you're looking for somebody very important, very busy, very successful to give you lots of time, I'm not sure that's going to happen. You may spend your life waiting for somebody else to give you time. But pick up the book they wrote. If you really find them inspiring, and you'll find yourself spending a lot of time with them, right? In a very special way. So that's why I keep saying there is so much work, good work, excellent storytelling that has been done for you. But you just have to pick up the book and read it. Now, having said that, Wendy, I have to say not everybody is a big reader. Yeah, 100 books is a little bit crazy. Even 50 is only for the absolute bookworms, a book a week. Some of us can pull that off routinely. I can. But I know very well, if I look amongst my friends, the people I know, my family, that's not everyone. But what I do say to people is, even if book reading is not your thing, treat it as exercise. Yeah, not all of us can go to the gym every day or every week. I know I can't. But a certain minimum amount of exercise, all of us need to do. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. It's the same with books. I don't expect you to do the 50 or 100 books, but I do say to everyone that I meet, one book a month, just 12 in the year. Just set yourself that target and do it. And then lots of people tell me, even for that one book, I don't have time. And then I say it differently. I say 10 pages every day. That's it. Just stop at page 10. And you will read that book of the month, and you will do it every month, and you will finish this. 10 pages a day you don't have time for? If that's true, then I hope all those things you're spending the time on is hugely rewarding for you. Whereas this little 10 pages could actually unlock so many things in your life. Choose the books. You don't have to read only the best, most worthy, most demanding books. Have fun reading. Yeah, make at least half the books. I do that. Half the books are just for enjoyment, right? For the sheer pleasure of getting lost in a story, or for, traveling the world. The others are the ones that are demanding. So don't make it a grind alone. Make it fun. But just a little bit, I think, is great exercise, mental exercise for all of us. It allows growth. I mean, I've written here that Isaac Asimov, the famous science fiction author, said, it's not just a library, it's not just a book. What you're entering is a spaceship. What you're entering is a time machine. What you are connecting to is a teacher. What you are, engaging with is a friend. It's a gateway. That's what books are. There are so many magical things if you allow them to be. For example, I wrote during the COVID year. I did not travel internationally at all during COVID, understandably, but I went to every corner of the world because I read books from all over the world, and I felt like I was in those countries. It was like traveling. So don't shut that off for yourselves is all I would say. There's such a huge opportunity with books.
I completely agree with you. And I think that's the line that I'm going to borrow from here henceforth, that treat reading as exercise. You might not like it, but it's really good for you. And once you get going, you might find yourself even enjoying it. And as we take the last, your parting shot, is there anything you'd like to the participants to get from this? And we can combine that with the last question. I see somebody saying here that how do you retain all the information that you get from, maybe there are 100 books. And yes. That's also another question that cynics always say, like, oh, but are you going to remember all the books that you've read? And I don't know if that's even important, but give a go at it as we close. From there, I'd just hand it over to CGC to set us off.
Okay, how do you retain what you read? I think the reason we ask questions like that, and I used to feel like that also, is we are taught that when you read a book, it's for an exam, and you have to retain something, and you have to reproduce what you read in a nice way so that you get your A grade, and then your life is set. Now, when you become a grown-up and you're not reading to pass an exam, I would say to you, please forget that. My personal thing is I do not try to remember anything. I just read it. Now, should it pop in my head? Should it catch my eye? Should it attract something? Should it stimulate my thinking? Then I will start dwelling on it. I'll take longer to read it. I'll make some notes. But most books, of the 100, maybe 80 of them made, they made an impact, but I'm leaving that in my subconscious. I'm not trying to turn that into my everyday learning. But there were probably 20 that really made me think, really made me wow. I either marveled at the writing or the inspiration or the insights. Those ones I start making notes and saying, okay, this I need to remember, this I need to introduce into my life, or this is an author whose back catalog or future books I'm 100% going to read. But we don't have to worry about it. Don't turn it into a grind. Don't turn it into study. Book reading should be just one of the things you do in your life. The ones that are going to stick with you will stick with you. If it didn't stick, don't worry about it too much. It's not study, it's enjoyment, and enjoyment that can lead to expansion of the mind, and it can lead to very, very good things. So, and if you allow me, just one more thing for the business-minded folks here who are thinking, why should I read books? I don't enjoy them. You can also read, you can outread your competitors. I wrote about that once. There's something you really need to know in your business. There's a whole bunch of books waiting for you. Read them and become better at competing. So there's also often a business case for reading. I do that sometimes. If there's a new thing going on, for example, artificial intelligence. I knew this thing is huge 3 or 4 years ago. I knew I don't understand it. So therefore, I must have read 10 or 12 books on the trot just about artificial intelligence. And I became that much more knowledgeable later and able to talk to my clients. So they're also there for that reason. So yes, back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Sunny Bindra, for joining us and for giving us this book, Up and Ahead. I'd encourage all the participants, please get your copy if you don't have already. Feel free to mark it heavily like mine, because I think I'll keep coming back to the book. And thank you so much, CGC, for putting together this forum that allows us to connect over books. And over back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sunny. Thank you, Wendy, for such an engaging dialogue. We thank our audience as well for choosing to spend their lunch hour with us. And we hope that this session was helpful to you and that you have taken away major tips to help you in your daily lives. This has been definitely a delightful conversation tailored for every person. Personally, I have been quite inspired, and I hope the same applies to you. Be the most of something to build and enhance my uniqueness. That has been my takeaway. We wish you a wonderful afternoon. Please remember to follow us on social media. We have a lot to offer you intellectually. We appreciate each and every one of you, our dear audience. For now, it's goodbye and see you in our next episode. Thank you again. Goodbye.